The night of the rescue was tense. Relia and Ethan moved through the shadows, their movements synchronized. They had practiced this moment countless times, but nothing could have prepared them for the reality. As they approached the facility, Relia's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on her. But she also felt Ethan's presence beside her, steady and reassuring. They infiltrated the facility with precision, taking out guards silently and efficiently. But as they reached the holding cells, they were met with resistance. A group of soldiers blocked their path, their weapons drawn. "Go!" Ethan shouted, pushing Relia toward the cells. "I'll hold them off." Relia hesitated, her eyes wide with fear. "Ethan." "Go," he repeated, his voice firm. "Save your family." With a final glance, Relia turned and ran. She found her family in one of the cells, their eyes lighting up with hope as they saw her. She quickly unlocked the door, her hands trembling. "We have to go," she said, her voice urgent. "Now." As they made their way back, Relia's heart sank. She could hear the sounds of fighting echoing through the facility. Ethan was still out there. "Your family is being held in detention block C," Daniel whispered, sliding his tablet across the table to Relia. They sat in the small maintenance shed that had become their meeting place over the past 3 days. It's a medium-security holding area for non-combatant detainees. Relia's skin rippled with blue-tinged relief as she studied the facility map Daniel had downloaded. "They're alive," she breathed. The iridescent patterns across her face shifted to reveal momentary joy before darkening again with concern. "But why are they being held? They've done nothing wrong." Daniel ran a hand through his short military-cut hair. "The official record says they were detained for unauthorized research in a restricted zone. Something about ancient Lyrian artifacts that overlap with human territory claims." "My father's archaeological work," Relia nodded. "He studies pre-civilization Lyrian settlements. The oldest sites are in the contested territories." Her fingers traced the outline of the detention facility. "How heavily guarded is this place?" "Too heavy for a frontal approach," Daniel replied, pointing to various sections of the map. "Motion sensors here and here. Armed patrols every 15 minutes. Biometric scan required for entry." He looked up at her. "I've been thinking about this for days. There's only one way in that might work." Relia leaned forward, her violet eyes intense. "Tell me." "I can get us inside using my clearance, but only on C-shift when my former squad leader is on duty. He owes me a favor and won't ask too many questions." Daniel highlighted a service corridor on the map. "The real challenge will be getting your family out without triggering alarms." Relia's skin patterns shifted to a determined copper gold. "What do you need from me?" Over the next hour, they refined their plan. Daniel would bring her in disguised as a Lyrian cultural consultant, a cover story made possible by the recent diplomatic initiatives between their species. Once inside, they would access the detention area through maintenance tunnels, disable the cell locks, and escort her family out through a rarely used emergency exit. As they worked, Daniel found himself increasingly fascinated by Relia. Unlike humans who disguise their emotions, her feelings played across her skin in shifting patterns and colors: determination, fear, hope, and occasional flashes of something warmer when their hands accidentally touched over the tablet. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly during a lull in their planning. "You risk everything. Your career. Your freedom." Daniel was silent for a moment, considering the question. "Before I was stationed here, I served in the Earth resource wars. I watched families torn apart by politics and power. People used as pawns." He met her gaze. "I swore I wouldn't be part of something like that again." Relia studied him, her skin patterns revealing deep contemplation. "There were many casualties when your people first arrived on our world. My people called all humans monsters. Her hand hesitantly reached across the table, fingers stopping just short of his. I see now that was wrong. The air between them seemed to change, charged with something neither had anticipated. Daniel cleared his throat. We should talk about what happens after. If we succeed, your family can't stay in human territory. You'll need somewhere safe to go. My mother's sister lives in the Eastern Coalition territories, Relia said. They would take us in. That's nearly 300 kilometers through contested lands, Daniel frowned. You've done enough, Relia assured him. Once we're free of the settlement, we can. No, Daniel interrupted. I'm seeing this through. All the way. The certainty in his voice surprised even himself. Relia's skin flushed with a warm golden hue he hadn't seen before. Thank you, she whispered. The days that followed were filled with careful preparation. Daniel smuggled civilian clothes and ration packs to the shed. Relia memorized the layout of the detention facility and practiced speaking with the formal accent of the Lyrian diplomatic corps. Each night, they parted with increasing reluctance. On the evening before their planned rescue, tension hung in the air as they reviewed their plans one final time. If something goes wrong, Relia said, her skin patterns betraying her fear despite her calm voice, you must promise to prioritize my family's safety over mine. Or yours. Daniel looked up sharply. That's not how this works. It is exactly how this works, she insisted. They are innocent. 3 lives against 2. The mathematics is simple. Not to me, Daniel said quietly. His hand moved across the table, fingers intertwining with hers. Her skin was smoother than human skin, warmer too, and the iridescent patterns swirled and pulsed where they touched. Relia's eyes widened, pupils dilating slightly as she looked at their joined hands. With her free hand, she reached up, hesitantly touching his face with a gentle curiosity. Your kind doesn't show emotions on your skin, she murmured, but I can feel your heart racing. Like mine. Daniel leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. Instead, she moved toward him, their foreheads touching in what he recognized as a traditional Lyrian gesture of trust. But there was nothing traditional about the way his pulse quickened or how her skin glowed with amber warmth. When their lips met, tentatively at first and then with growing certainty, the differences between their species seemed to fade away. Her kiss tasted faintly of cinnamon and something alien yet wonderful. The patterns on her skin brightened to an incandescent gold that illuminated the small shed. As they separated, both slightly breathless, Relia's expression was a mixture of wonder and newfound resolve. Now, she said softly, we have even more reason to succeed tomorrow. Daniel nodded, still holding her hand tightly. Together, he promised. Whatever happens, we face it together. Outside the shed, the settlement's night cycle began, lights dimming across the compound as they made their final preparations for what would either be their greatest triumph, or their last stand. I'll continue with Part 3 now. Part 3, Into Enemy Territory. The security checkpoint loomed ahead, a stark metal structure under harsh artificial lights. Daniel adjusted the collar of his uniform and glanced at Relia beside him. The traditional Lyrian diplomatic attire he'd procured for her covered most of her distinguishing features, but couldn't hide the nervous ripples of copper and blue moving beneath her skin. Remember, keep your emotions calm, he whispered. The patterns on your skin need to stay steady. Relia nodded, taking a deep breath. The colors across her exposed face stabilized into the formal burgundy hue of Lyrian officials. I'm ready. They approached the checkpoint together, Daniel walking with military precision while Relia maintained the measured pace of a cultural consultant. He handed over his credentials to the guard, a stocky man with a perpetual scowl. Matthews, the guard grunted, scanning the ID. You're not scheduled for Block C today. Special cultural assessment, Daniel replied smoothly. Orders from Captain Henrix. The Lyrian detainees have requested items for religious observance. We need to verify their authenticity. The guard's eyes narrowed as he studied Relia. Haven't seen you before. I was assigned from the embassy yesterday, Relia answered, her accent perfect. The festival of Shaloth approaches. It is important the detained scholars have proper ceremonial items. Daniel held his breath as the guard considered this. Then, to his relief, the man shrugged and pressed his thumb to the scanner. Henrix and his diplomatic initiatives. Waste of time if you ask me. Just following orders, Daniel replied neutrally as the barrier lifted. They passed through 2 more checkpoints with the same story, each time Daniel's former squad connections proving invaluable. As they entered the main facility, the stark white corridors and omnipresent cameras reminded Daniel of how little room for error they had. The maintenance access is down this hallway, he murmured, guiding Relia with a light touch to her elbow. We have approximately 20 minutes before the next patrol. They located the service door and Daniel quickly input the access code he'd memorized. Inside, the narrow maintenance tunnel was dimly lit with emergency lighting. From here, we need to move quickly, Daniel said, pulling off his uniform jacket and retrieving a small toolkit from its hidden pocket. Your family is 3 levels down. As they descended through the maintenance shafts, the facility's oppressive atmosphere grew heavier. Twice they froze as patrols passed by adjacent corridors, Relia's skin dimming to near invisibility in the shadows. There, Daniel whispered finally, pointing to a ventilation grate. Detention block C is on the other side. Relia peered through the slats. I see cells, but not my family. They'll be in the high-value section at the far end, Daniel explained, working to loosen the grate. Political detainees are kept separate. Once the grate was free, Daniel checked his watch. We have 7 minutes until the guard rotation. Let's move. They slipped into the detention block corridor, keeping close to the wall. The cells they passed contained various Lyrian civilians, most looking dejected or frightened. Daniel felt a pang of shame at his military's involvement in these detentions. At the end of the corridor, a reinforced door blocked their path. Daniel connected his hacked security bypass to the panel and waited anxiously as it worked through the encryption. Daniel, Relia whispered urgently, someone's coming. Footsteps echoed from around the corner. Daniel quickly pulled Relia into a recessed doorway, their bodies pressed close together in the narrow space. Her skin warmed against his, patterns swirling with nervous energy. Stay calm, he breathed against her ear. Your patterns. She nodded, focusing intently. The vibrant colors across her skin settled into a more subdued palette as she controlled her emotions. The guard walked past their hiding place without a glance, continuing his patrol down the opposite corridor. Daniel released the breath he'd been holding, suddenly very aware of Relia's proximity. Her eyes met his, violet depths filled with unspoken intensity. For a moment, the mission faded to background as an electric current seemed to pass between them. Daniel's hand moved to her face, tracing the now luminous patterns that betrayed her feelings despite her control. She leaned into his touch, her skin glowing golden where his fingers made contact. We should. Daniel began. Yes, she agreed, though neither moved immediately. The soft beep of the security bypass completing its task broke the moment. They separated reluctantly, refocusing on their mission. The reinforced door slid open, revealing a smaller corridor with just 3 cells. In the first, 3 Lyrians looked up in surprise, an older male with distinguished silver patterns across his copper skin, a female with the same violet eyes as Relia, and a younger female who was clearly Relia's sister. Relia? Her father gasped, standing unsteadily. How? No time for explanations, Daniel interrupted, working on the cell lock. We need to move quickly. Relia's sister stared at Daniel with open fear. A human? "Relia, what have you done?" "He's helping us," Relia explained, her skin patterns showing absolute trust as she glanced at Daniel. "Without him, I couldn't have reached you." The lock clicked open, and the family rushed together in a flurry of touching hands and foreheads, their skin patterns synchronizing in shared joy. Daniel turned away to give them privacy, keeping watch on the corridor. "We have 4 minutes to reach the emergency exit," he announced. "Can everyone walk?" Relia's mother looked weakened but nodded determinedly. "We can manage." They moved swiftly back through the detention block, Daniel leading and Relia supporting her mother. At the maintenance access point, Daniel helped them through one by one. As Relia's sister disappeared into the shaft, an alarm suddenly blared through the facility. Red emergency lights began flashing. "They've discovered the override," Daniel said grimly, ushering Relia toward the shaft. "Go, I'll be right behind you." Relia hesitated, her skin cycling through patterns of fear and determination. Together, she reminded him, gripping his hand tightly. "We promised." Daniel nodded, squeezing her hand once before releasing it. "Together. Now go, your family needs you to lead them through the tunnels while I seal the access points behind us." As Relia reluctantly entered the shaft, Daniel heard shouting from the corridor's far end. Guards were approaching quickly. He slid into the maintenance tunnel and pulled the grate close just as uniformed figures rounded the corner. They navigated the maze of service tunnels with desperate speed, the sounds of pursuit growing behind them. When they finally reached the emergency exit, Daniel punched in the override code with trembling fingers. "It's jammed," he growled, slamming his palm against the panel. Relia's father stepped forward. "Allow me." His long fingers worked deftly at the mechanism. "I studied human engineering before the conflicts began." The door slid open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing the dark perimeter of the settlement beyond. Freedom was just meters away, but so were the approaching security forces. "Go," Daniel urged them. "Head for the tree line. I'll hold them off." Relia's skin flashed crimson with alarm. "No. We stay together." Their eyes locked in silent communication, and in that moment, Daniel knew with absolute certainty that whatever happened next, his life had changed forever. "I'm not leaving you," Relia insisted, her skin patterns flaring with intensity that matched the determination in her voice. Daniel looked from her to her weakened family members, making a split-second decision. "Your parents and sister need to get to safety now. We'll create a diversion and meet them at the rendezvous point." Relia's father stepped forward, placing a hand on his daughter's shoulder. The patterns of their skin connected briefly in what Daniel recognized as a familial bond. "He's right, Relia. Your mother cannot move quickly, and we need someone to guide us to safety." "The extraction point we discussed," Daniel reminded her. "The abandoned research outpost. You remember the way?" After a moment of conflicted silence, Relia nodded. 3 kilometers east along the river bend. The structure with the broken communication array. "We'll meet you there before dawn," Daniel promised. He pulled a small device from his pocket and pressed it into the hands of Relia's father. "Emergency beacon. Use it only if you're discovered." Relia embraced her family quickly, their skin patterns merging in harmonious swirls of copper and silver. As they disappeared into the darkness of the perimeter forest, she turned back to Daniel, her expression resolute. "What's the diversion?" she asked. Daniel grinned, pulling a small explosive charge from his boot. "Something to keep security busy on the opposite side of the compound." They moved swiftly through the shadows of the facility, the sound of alarms creating a chaotic atmosphere that worked to their advantage. At the fuel depot, Daniel attached the charge to a storage tank. "Non-critical systems only," he explained, seeing Relia's concerned expression. "Enough smoke and sparks to draw attention, not enough to cause serious damage." "Like the light festivals of my homeworld," Relia observed, her skin briefly shimmering with an almost mischievous pattern. Daniel set the timer for 3 minutes. Let's move. They sprinted toward the eastern perimeter, using the confusion of patrolling guards to their advantage. When the explosion erupted behind them in a spectacular display of light and noise, every guard turned toward the commotion. Now, Daniel whispered, leading Relia toward a section of the perimeter fence he'd secretly weakened days earlier. They slipped through the gap and into the dense alien forest beyond, the strange phosphorescent vegetation providing just enough light to navigate by. Behind them, the settlement blazed with emergency lights as personnel rushed to contain the diversion. "We did it," Relia breathed, her skin glowing with exhilarated patterns that illuminated the dark forest around them. "We're not safe yet," Daniel cautioned, but couldn't help smiling at her jubilation. They moved quickly through the forest, following the sound of the nearby river. The unique flora of the planet reacted to their passage, luminescent fronds curling as they brushed past. The twin moons of Proxima B cast everything in an ethereal blue glow that complemented the natural patterns flowing across Relia's exposed skin. After an hour of careful progress, they stopped to rest in a small clearing. Daniel checked his tactical map, confirming they were on course for the rendezvous point. "We're making good time," he said. No signs of pursuit. Relia sat beside him on a fallen log, her shoulder touching his. "Why did you really help us, Daniel?" "The truth this time." Daniel looked at her, studying the intricate patterns that shifted across her features. Unlike humans who could hide their emotions, Lyrians wore their feelings openly on their skin. What he saw now was something he'd never expected to find on this alien world. "Because it was right," he answered simply. "And because from the moment I saw you, I knew you were someone worth protecting." Her skin flushed with a warm golden hue that he'd come to recognize as affection. "In my culture, we believe that when two souls are meant to find each other, the universe creates a path between them. Even across different worlds." Daniel's hand found hers in the dim light, their fingers intertwining. The patterns on her skin brightened where they touched, creating swirls of light that seemed to transfer between them. "There's no protocol for this," he said softly. Relia smiled. "Perhaps we write our own." When their lips met this time, it wasn't with the hesitation of their first kiss but with a certainty that transcended their differences. Her skin glowed with such intensity that the clearing around them was bathed in golden light. Daniel's hands traced the luminous patterns along her arms, marveling at how they responded to his touch, brightening and changing. Relia's fingers traveled across his chest, exploring the alien landscape of his body with gentle curiosity. "Your heart beats so quickly," she murmured against his neck. "Like the wings of our forest birds." Their embrace deepened, both discovering the strange and wonderful ways their bodies differed and harmonized. In the isolation of the alien forest, they found a new language of touch and response that required no translation. The bioluminescent flora around them seemed to pulse in sympathy with the patterns flaring across Relia's skin as their connection intensified. Later, as they lay together beneath the canopy of glowing vegetation, Daniel traced the now calm patterns across Relia's shoulder. "We should continue to the rendezvous point. Your family will be worried." Relia nodded, her expression growing serious. "What happens after we reach them?" "You've committed treason by helping us. You can never return to your settlement." "I've been thinking about that," Daniel admitted. "The Eastern Coalition territories you mentioned, they accept human refugees occasionally. Scientists, mostly. People who can offer knowledge." Hope flickered across Relia's skin in bright silver patterns. "You would come with us?" "If you'll have me," he said. "I have combat training, engineering knowledge. I could be useful to your people." "Not just useful," Relia whispered, pressing her forehead to his in the Lyrian gesture of deepest connection. "Essential." A distant sound broke their moment of peace, the distinctive whine of a human transport craft. Daniel sat up quickly, scanning the sky through breaks in the canopy. "Search parties," he said grimly. "They're using thermal imaging. We need to move." They gathered their few possessions and continued through the forest at a faster pace. The sounds of the search craft grew louder, sweeping patterns through the trees behind them. As dawn approached, they caught sight of the abandoned research outpost in the distance. Its broken communication array silhouetted against the lightning sky. Through his binoculars, Daniel could make out 3 figures waiting anxiously at the entrance. "There they are," he told Relia, relief evident in his voice. But as they prepared to make their final approach, the forest behind them erupted with voices and light beams. Human soldiers had picked up their trail. Daniel pulled Relia behind a massive fern-like growth. "They're between us and your family," he whispered. "We need a distraction." Relia's skin patterned with resolve. "I'll lead them away. You get to my family." "No," Daniel interrupted firmly. "We're not separating." The search party was drawing closer, their lights cutting through the pre-dawn gloom. Daniel looked from the soldiers to the outpost, calculating distances and risks. His hand found Relia's, their fingers interlocking. "Together," he reminded her. "No matter what happens next." The search party's lights cut through the undergrowth, drawing closer with each passing second. Daniel pulled Relia deeper into the shelter of the massive fern-like plants, his mind racing through possible escape routes. "Your family has spotted the search party," he whispered, watching through the foliage as Relia's parents and sister retreated inside the abandoned outpost. "They've taken cover." "That's good." Relia's skin pulsed with anxious patterns. "We're so close." Daniel surveyed their surroundings, eyes settling on a cluster of the bioluminescent flora that dominated this section of forest. An idea formed, dangerous, but possibly their only chance. "These plants," he said quietly. "They respond to your emotional patterns, don't they? I've noticed them brightening when you're near." Relia nodded. "All Lyrian vegetation resonates with our bioelectric field. It's how our ancestors tracked prey before modern technology. Can you amplify it? Create a distraction bright enough to draw their attention away from the outpost?" Understanding dawned in her violet eyes. "Yes, but I would need to release full emotional response. It would make me visible." "I'll cover you," Daniel assured her. "We just need to give your family enough time to escape through the back of the outpost. There's a ravine beyond that leads to the river." Relia touched her forehead to his in their now familiar gesture of connection. "Signal them first." Daniel retrieved a small laser pointer from his pack and sent 3 quick flashes toward the outpost, their predetermined emergency signal. After a moment, a single flash returned, acknowledging the message. "They understand," he confirmed. "When I give the word, channel everything you feel into the plants around us, then run west. I'll follow and cover our tracks." They waited until the search party had moved past their position, closer to the outpost. Daniel squeezed Relia's hand. "Now." Relia closed her eyes, the patterns across her skin intensifying to a brilliant display of swirling colors. She focused on every emotion she'd experienced in the past days, fear, hope, love, determination, and projected them outward. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The bioluminescent flora around them erupted into a dazzling light show, waves of blue, gold, and violet rippling outward through the forest. Every plant for 50 meters pulsed in sympathetic rhythm with Relia's emotional state. The search party turned instantly, shouting in surprise at the unprecedented display. "Run!" Daniel urged, pulling Relia westward as the soldiers moved toward the light show. They sprinted through the underbrush, Daniel navigating by the rising sun while keeping a protective arm around Relia. Behind them, the forest continued to glow with fading bioluminescence, keeping the search party distracted. After 15 minutes of hard running, they paused to catch their breath beside a small stream. Daniel checked his tactical display. "Your family is moving," he reported. "They've cleared the outpost and are heading for the rendezvous coordinates we established." Relief washed across Relia's features in gentle blue waves. "And the search party?" "Still investigating the light display. You gave us the window we needed." They continued more cautiously now, moving along the stream to mask their trail. The terrain grew rougher as they approached the ravine that would lead them to the secondary meeting point, a series of caves Daniel had discovered during earlier patrols. By midday, they'd reached the caves without further signs of pursuit. Exhausted but vigilant, they waited at the entrance, scanning for any sign of Relia's family. "What if they didn't make it?" Relia asked, her skin showing worried patterns. Daniel was about to offer reassurance when movement caught his eye, 3 figures emerging from the tree line, moving with the distinctive gait of Lyrians. "There," he pointed. Relia's joy manifested in brilliant gold patterns racing across her skin as she ran to meet her family. Their reunion was a beautiful display of synchronized skin patterns as they touched foreheads and embraced. Daniel maintained a respectful distance until Relia's father approached him, extending his hands in the traditional Lyrian greeting. "My daughter tells me you risked everything to save us," he said, his skin showing patterns of deep gratitude. "Our people have a saying, those who share danger become family." "I'm honored," Daniel replied, clasping the older Lyrian's hands. Relia's mother studied him with knowing eyes. "Your aura has merged with my daughter's," she observed. "A rare thing between different species." Daniel glanced at Relia, who approached with a shy smile, her skin patterns mirroring his own emotions. "It is rare," she agreed, taking Daniel's hand. "But not impossible." They made camp in the caves that night, Daniel setting up perimeter alarms from his tactical kit. As darkness fell, they gathered around a small heat source, planning their next move. "The Eastern Coalition settlement is 3 days' journey," Relia's father explained, sketching a map in the soil. "We have contacts there, scientists who study cross-species collaboration." "Will they accept a human?" Daniel asked. "A human who rescued political prisoners from his own people?" Relia's sister said with newfound respect. "They will want to hear your story." Dawn brought clear skies and no signs of pursuit. They set out toward the Eastern Coalition territories, traveling through increasingly unfamiliar landscape. Daniel found himself relying on Lyrian knowledge of the terrain, a strange reversal of his military training. The journey was arduous but brought unexpected moments of joy. Daniel learned Lyrian survival techniques, while sharing his own knowledge of Earth customs. Each night, he and Relia grew closer, the patterns on her skin responding to his touch in ways that fascinated and moved him. On the 3rd day, they crested a hill to see a sprawling settlement in the valley below, structures that blended natural materials with advanced technology, distinctly Lyrian in design. "The Eastern Coalition," Relia's father announced with relief. As they approached the settlement, Daniel felt a moment of apprehension. Would he be welcomed or viewed with suspicion? Relia sensed his concern, her fingers intertwining with his. "My people value actions above origins," she assured him. "What you did speaks louder than which planet birthed you." The settlement guards met them at the perimeter, initially wary of Daniel until Relia's father explained their situation. To Daniel's surprise, they were escorted not to a detention area but to an administrative building where coalition leaders listened intently to their story. A human who defied his own military to rescue detained scholars, the coalition leader mused, her skin patterns showing genuine interest. Perhaps there is hope for diplomatic progress after all. In the weeks that followed, Daniel found acceptance among the Eastern Coalition. His military knowledge proved valuable to their defense planning, while his perspective on human culture helped bridge misunderstandings. He was assigned quarters near Relia's family and granted provisional citizenship status, the first human to receive such an honor. One evening, as twin moons rose over the settlement, Relia led Daniel to a cliffside overlooking the valley. Bioluminescent plants lined the path, responding to her presence with gentle pulses of light. "My people have a bonding ritual," she explained, her skin glowing with nervous anticipation. "When two souls choose to join their paths, they create a permanent pattern together." She revealed a small vial containing a shimmering liquid. "This contains my bioelectric signature. If you accept it, it will create a resonance between us that even other Lyrians will recognize." Daniel looked at the vial, understanding the significance of what she offered. "What would it mean for me?" "Your skin won't show patterns like mine," she said. "But you would carry a trace of my essence, and I would carry yours. We would be connected in ways that transcend physical differences." Daniel took her hands in his, the now familiar warmth of her skin against his a constant reminder of their unlikely journey together. "When I first saw you trying to break into the water facility," he said with a smile, "I never imagined we'd end up here." "The universe creates paths between souls meant to find each other," Relia reminded him, her skin patterns forming the complex symphony he now recognized as love. Under the alien stars of Proxima b, Daniel accepted the vial, completing a bonding ritual unprecedented in the history of either species. As the shimmering liquid created a temporary glow across his human skin, he knew that whatever challenges awaited them in this new world, they would face them together, not as human and Lyrian, but as partners who had chosen each other across the divisions of worlds, biology, and conflict. "New beginnings," he whispered against her forehead. Relia's skin brightened with joy as she completed the ancient words of her people, "in this life and whatever comes after." In the settlement below, lights twinkled in harmony with the stars above, a fitting metaphor for the unexpected peace they had found amidst a galaxy of turmoil.